Welcome back, everyone. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about the genetic link with regards to certain types of mental illness. This is the title of the article, and I'll put a link to it in the description for this video. Study of 2 million people. Inherited risk for mental illness spills across diagnostic lines far more than realized. There is a question that has haunted psychiatry since before it had a name. Back when the alienists in their frock coats were still debating whether madness ran in families or simply accumulated like dust. When a person inherits a vulnerability to mental illness, does that vulnerability have an address? Does it point with any precision toward the specific disorder that eventually appears on the chart? Or does it scatter, landing across the whole landscape of the mind like seed thrown from a moving hand? Dr. Kenneth Kendler, a psychiatric geneticist at Virginia Commonwealth University, led a team that analyzed data from more than 2 million individuals born in Sweden between 1950 and 1995. And when I hear that, I wonder, does it make a difference where you live? Right? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. The team selected 9 major psychiatric and substance use disorders: schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, major depression, anxiety disorder, PTSD, ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, alcohol use disorder, and drug use disorder. Basically, the list of things that we see in our office, certainly on a weekly basis, and depending on the day, sometimes a daily basis. For each one, they calculated a measure they call genetic specificity, the percentage of total inherited risk in a person with a given diagnosis that actually points towards that diagnosis and not towards the other, right? Is there a connection between, whether or not somebody in the family suffered from a behavioral health issue or a substance use disorder and how that might affect me? One of the questions that we typically ask is, is there a history in the family, right? If someone's an alcoholic, was their parent or their grandparent an alcoholic? If somebody suffers from severe depression, is there somebody else in the family that also does? And I think this really is very interesting stuff. Schizophrenia sat at the top with a genetic specificity of 73.1%, meaning that nearly 3/4 of the aggregate genetic risk carried by individuals with schizophrenia coded exclusively for schizophrenia, meaning there's a genetic connection to this thing. Bipolar disorder followed up 54.8%. Alcohol use disorder came in at 54.1%. ADHD registered 48.2%. Autism spectrum disorder 47.5%, and PTSD 47.4%. God, that's a mouthful. So, and they asked this question: could this finding reshape how doctors think about the boundaries between one mental illness and another? Could it mean that some of the categories clinicians spend entire careers distinguishing are, at the genetic level, less distinct than anyone assumed? Bipolar disorder showed the widest swings. Patients whose illness began early in life had substantially higher genetic specificity than those with late onset, and the drop-off was steep. All right, I'm not going to bore you with the numbers anymore because you can read this for yourself, but you get the point, right? That there is a depending on the disorder, there's obviously a correlation between how strong the genetic connection is and how weak it is. So, in your family, if you have a loved one who is suffering from a behavioral health issue, I would ask you to consider that. Is there some history in the family? Was there a parent or a grandparent, or maybe even an uncle or an aunt, who suffered from a similar, if not the same, behavioral health issue? Because if there is, this might explain why. So, really interesting stuff. I'd be interested to hear what you think about this. If there's any connection in your family between what you're seeing now and what has happened in the past. Let me know what you think about it. This is fascinating stuff, and I think it's confirming a lot of frankly what we've been seeing for a long time in our office. And I'm glad somebody did the survey and did the homework. So let me know what you think. If there's an issue going on in your family that that I haven't made a video about, let me know. I'll make a video for you, because if it's affecting you, probably affecting somebody else's family too. And I want to make sure that you get the information that you need. With that said, if you like this content, please give me a thumbs up. If you want to see more of this content, which I put out on a daily, sometimes twice daily basis, let me know. Subscribe to the channel so you can get it. And with that said, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.